Okay, we're on. Hello, everybody. We'll get started in a couple of minutes, right at 6. Getting very frustrated here, waiting for spring to start. We still got like 2 feet of snow on the ground. Very late in the season for that to be the case. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So this is the number 6 in the series on the Bojjhangas. The Bojjhangas, or the factors of enlightenment or wings of awakening, are 7 in number. And with mindfulness in the middle, there are 2 wings. 3 of the factors energize the mind and 3 calm the mind. And we're on the tranquilizing or calming factors now. We've dealt with passaddhi, tranquility. And today we're going to talk about samadhi. Samadhi, of course, also occurs as the 8th factor of the path. And it has traditionally been translated as concentration. Although the first point I would like to make is that I really want to discourage the use of that translation. I think it's misleading. And I've seen how it, by an over-literal use of the English word here, as in some other cases, but this one is particularly egregious, by the over-reliance on the English meaning of the word, it leads meditators astray. And I think too many meditators try and force the mind, try to narrow the mind onto the object, which is what's implied by the word concentration. When you concentrate something, you're making it smaller, you're focusing in on it. That's not how samadhi is defined in the Pali literature at all. The definition as found in the Visuddhimagga and in the Abhidhamma relies on the idea of stability or stillness. The term non-wavering is used as a definition. So it's a stillness of mind. It's a stability, non-movement. And this does not in any way imply a narrowing of the mind. The mind that has good samadhi is expansive and wide open, but it's not flitting about from object to object. It's stable on the chosen object. Now consider an analogy with the the cosmological equivalent of jhana, which is the mind of a Brahma god. A Brahma god can survey thousands of world systems, just as a man can have sesame seeds in his hand, in the palm of his hand, and view them. So this implies a vast, expansive, wide open mind, not a narrow one mind reduced to one point. You know, I think this translation problem also occurs in the path factor ekagata, which has been traditionally translated as one-pointedness. I think it could that compound could also be parsed to mean gone to unity or gone to oneness. So again, it doesn't mean a narrowing down of the mind to a point, but it means that the mind is unified in itself. It's not divided, as the ordinary mind with no samadhi is constantly being divided between rapidly changing objects, miscellaneous thoughts, sense impressions, etc. Whereas the mind with samadhi and ekagata is stabilized. It's solid. You know, think of the rock of Gibraltar. It's stable. It's unmoving. You know, this is the meaning of samadhi. Samadhi, we could also say, is the critical quality for developing deep meditation, going into jhana. Excuse me. That when we practice samatha meditation, we're taking a arbitrarily chosen object such as the breath, and we're attempting to fill the mind with that object. So the best way to think of it is not putting the mind onto the object, but opening the mind to the object, letting the object fill the mind. The mind with samadhi is quiet and still and unmoving, ungrasping, unwavering. Think of it as a vast open space, and it's filled with a single object more and more. And doesn't waver from that object. You know, this is the essence of samadhi. It's a calming factor in the bojjhangas because such a mind is not agitated, it's not disturbed, it's calm and at peace. So it is allied with the other calming factors of passaddhi, which we dealt with last week, and upekkha, which we're going to discuss next week. You know, all three of these calm and stabilize the mind, keep it on an even keel. Now, in terms of balancing the factors, it's very important that samadhi be balanced with energy, virya, which is one of the energizing factors we've already discussed. These two, virya and samadhi, also occur in the list of the 5 faculties, the indriya. And in that case, they're explicitly paired one with the other. And this is one of the most practical points of meditation for skill in meditation and progress in meditation, is being able to balance samadhi and virya. If you have samadhi that's not energized, it does tend to dullness and sleepiness. It becomes almost a hypnotic fading of the mind. If you have virya, energy, without samadhi, the mind becomes very agitated and restless. So you need to have the two in balance. So working on these factors, they have to be developed, all seven of them have to be developed properly, so that the energizing wing and the calming wing are brought up together. A good analogy would be like changing a tire. You change a tire on your car, you have to go around and tighten one lug nut a little bit, then go to the next one and then tighten that, and so on, going to opposite sides each time to draw the hub in evenly. If you reef down on one lug nut all the way and over tighten it, you'll damage the hub, and you'll never get it to fit properly. So it's not a case of having too much samadhi or too much energy. Absolutely, but it's a question of having too much relative to the other one. They have to be brought up together. And a good part of the skill of meditation is seeing which way your practice is going, and working on the side that's weak. In the case of samadhi, if you're having trouble in your meditation, it's not going well, it'll be one of two general patterns. Either the mind will be restless and unable to settle, and that's the case of too much virya, not enough samadhi, or the mind will be dull and sleepy, lacking brightness, lacking clarity. Then that's a case of too much samadhi relative to virya, not enough virya. So if that's the case, if you're experiencing dullness and sloth and torpor, that is not the time to try and deepen your samadhi. That is exactly the wrong thing to do. That's the time to bring up your energy, even if that means easing off on the unification of mind, allowing a bit of distraction in, such as opening the eyes to bring in light, or getting up and walking, or switching altogether to doing a more involved kind of contemplation rather than a one-pointed meditation. Once you're energized, then you can go back to bringing up the samadhi. I think balancing these two factors is very important. And I think part of what's going on here is something that Ajahn Sona used to call going against the grain. I think a good rule of thumb, another way of expressing this, and a good kind of touchstone, is whatever the desire mind is telling you to do, you should probably do the opposite. If you're overly energized and you've got poor samadhi, the mind will be unable to settle and stabilize on the object. So the mind will come up with a desire mind, like the little whispering voice of Mara will come up with all kinds of things that you need to do right now. Anything but sit there and stay with your object. Whereas the proper course of action in this case is no action. To remain still, even though it's difficult, to try and still the body and the mind, to remain physically and mentally as still and quiet and withdrawn as possible. That's the only way to overcome restlessness. You never overcome restlessness by appeasing it, by giving into it. It'll just come back stronger and stronger the next time. On the other hand, we're talking about samadhi today. If the mind is going into this kind of dull, sleepy state, the desire mind wants to just kind of curl up and lean over and wrap a blanket around your shoulders and just go into a kind of pleasant doze. And that that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You need to really snap out of it. Even though that means you're going to back off on developing samadhi temporarily. You've got to get your energy level up. So this balancing of these two factors, virya and samadhi, is a good shorthand for the balancing of all the factors. These are the two most immediate practical factors in the set, and they are, as I said, explicitly paired in the parallel list of the five indriya. So samadhi, as I said, also comes in to the Eightfold Noble Path. Sama samadhi is the eighth factor on the path. And it's there defined as the four jhanas. Samadhi is perfected by the jhanas. The culmination of samadhi is jhana, when the mind is completely stabilized. And what prevents that from happening are the five nivarna, the five hindrances: sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, worry, and skeptical doubt. These nivarnas are the opposite of samadhi, because in these cases the mind is not stabilized. It's these are like side paths. The mind goes wandering off, looking at this and that, instead of being stabilized on a single object. If you're developing vipassana, samadhi works a little bit differently, because you are being open to different objects. But the technical description, as for example presented by Mahasi Sayadaw, is that the perfect state of mind for vipassana is like momentary access concentration, is the phrase used, which means that there's a rough and ready equivalent, moment by moment, to deep samadhi nearing the state of jhana. So the mind is completely focused or taken up by the object at this moment. This is a tricky thing to do. Vipassana is generally difficult to master, but it is really the kind of most important, the final practice, the practice that leads out of samsara, that leads to nibbana. So the meaning here is the momentary deep samadhi is that samadhi is present as a complete absorption into the object for a single moment. The time factor is different here. Instead of trying to remain present with the same object over a long continuous stream of mind moments, one has the mind in an open receptive state and allows it to be fully present with the current object. And the trick here is a twofold knack that has to be developed, a kind of a balancing act. On the one hand, you have to be fully present with the present moment object. But on the other hand, you have to let it go or let it pass through. Let it immediately cease and be open and receptive to the next object. And this can often be very difficult. The first side of the balance, being present with the object, is difficult enough. But then the second part becomes the real skill to master, because we tend to want to get engaged with some objects. They seem interesting or fascinating or maybe scary, or whatever. There's some strong emotional resonance with the object, and we tend to want to keep it going for a while and play with it. And we have to kind of drop that tendency and just allow the object to be and pass away and not be, and then be aware of the next object. And in each moment, the mind should ideally have that same deep unification as in samadhi leading to jhana. You'll know your samadhi is good if you feel at ease in the meditation, if you feel bright and awake. And often it's a good check on your meditation is what do you feel like immediately after, when the bell rings and you get up from your seat? Do you feel dull and sleepy, confused? Then your meditation wasn't very good. Or do you feel bright and awake and more clear and more on than before you started? Well, that's a good sign. So developing samadhi requires, first of all, a disengagement from fascination with sense objects. Now, this is the first of the nivarana, is sense desire. And sense desire, in terms of developing deep meditation, doesn't just mean really strong, sensuous thoughts or objects, but it just means going out through the senses. It can be very subtle. If you're seeking to please your senses at all, then you're still caught in that level of consciousness. Then your samadhi has a limit of how deep it will go, because jhana actually transcends the sense desire realm. So a disengagement from interest in the senses. And the same with the second hindrance, vyapada, or ill will. It doesn't just mean really gross forms of vyapada like anger, but like irritation. Like if you're sitting in meditation and your mind is going to feeling irritated by a pain in the leg or a fly buzzing in the room, or something like that, you're going out through the senses in a negative way. And it's just as bad as going out in a positive or pleasurable way. It's still just as disruptive to the meditation. So one of the qualities or methods to foster if you're trying to develop deep meditation is sense restraint, indriya samvara. To rein in the senses, not be taking an interest in what's occurring at the sense doors, except if you're doing samatha meditation, you'll have one particular object at one sense door that you're focusing on. such as the sensation of the sense of touch at the nose tip for anapanasati, or a visual image for a kasina meditation. So, to sum up, and before I go to questions, just to sum up the main points here, that samadhi is a calming factor. It's critical for developing meditation. It should be developed pairwise with energy. The two work together. If one is weak, then the meditation will not progress. And a good deal of the skill of meditation is working on which half of the pair you're weak on at any given moment and bringing it up. And finally, the meaning of samadhi is stability, non-movement, non-wavering. And I think this is quite important. So I've given up entirely, except occasionally if I forget. I'm given up in my teaching and speaking about this, of using the word concentration altogether. I don't like it at all. I usually just leave samadhi untranslated. I think it's very misleading to think of it as concentration. So I'll leave off the formal remarks there, and happy to go to questions at this time. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Oh, here we go. Here's the first one. What do you recommend to a person who has so much emotional pain and suffering that they can't even bring themselves to the meditation cushion? Yeah, that's a very important question, actually. I think that meditation, well, for someone who's in deep distress, meditation is not generally the best route through to begin with. Although some meditation can help, I would particularly recommend doing metta, loving kindness meditation or compassion meditation, karuna. But it's better to try and work on your emotional state as best you can in other ways. I think I've always felt that for depression, the best approach is active service, something that you put yourself into the service of others, and it requires getting out and being active to do it. Often are too hung up on definitions, and they're too goal oriented. Whereas I prefer to think of the passage through the jhanas as a continuum that is just deeper and deeper samadhi, and as far along as you can go, it's always good. You can always deepen your samadhi. Hi, Bante. Samadhi conducive to piti and sukha because we are transcending Mara's sense realm? Yes. In MN 25, the jhanas are practiced in order for the deer to hide from Mara. Samadhi concentration. Yeah, this is This is one very important aspect, and really one way of defining jhana is the mind that has transcended the sense desire plane. And the sense realm is Mara's kingdom. So you're escaping from Mara's snares when you transcend jhana, transcend sense desire realm, and sit in jhana. It's not yet full liberation, but you have essentially temporarily removed yourself from the biggest and most distracting chunk of samsara. The mind is much more at peace. Can we translate samadhi as stabilization? Yeah, stabilization, stability, stillness, all those words would be okay. I prefer to just leave it untranslated. I am attending a samatha weekend retreat in a few weeks. Any advice, please? Yeah, if you're going to, I could say that I reiterate the point I made about sense restraint. If you're on a weekend retreat, that's a good chunk of time to get some deep meditation in, and you'll get the most out of it the more you can refrain from going out through the senses. Don't keep looking for little holidays with looking out the window, or all these kind of little escapades out through the senses really hinder the meditation. Try and keep the mind focused inward to whatever degree you're able, and avoid going out through the senses. Can I be in samadhi when I'm working in the kitchen? No, not really deep samadhi. I mean, you can have, I think, more, the factor you would want to develop more at that time would be sati. But you still can have that kind of momentary samadhi to some degree. But when you're active, when you're doing something, that's not really conducive to developing a deep samadhi. Is thinking of the levels of jhana as attainments and achievements a hindrance? Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big problem that comes up. People can, almost like they're keeping score, and really, when you deepen your samadhi and enter some stage of jhana, you're not really gaining anything. You're not going anywhere. You're simplifying and purifying the mind. You're dropping away factors and returning to a more primordial state of mind, a more natural state of mind, a mind without all the flurry of the sense desire level. Is it not primarily concentration, the effort to stabilize attention, at least in the beginning? Well, there is the factor of vitakka. Vitakka and vichara are two factors of first jhana, and vitakka is putting the mind on the object. So it's the only factor that is really, it's like that focus, that kind of narrowing of attention. But that is advisable to use that sparingly. You just need to stabilize the mind onto the object, and then you hold it with your chara, which is steady attention. So I still wouldn't use the word concentration. I think it's best just to get away from it. I have been experiencing tremors which have negatively affected my practice. Is it possible to achieve samadhi with muscle tremors? That's depending on a lot of factors here. Is how far that the tremors are physical in origin, or if they're psychological in origin. If they're psychological in origin, you should be able to stabilize them if you calm the mind. Otherwise, it's going to be more difficult. It should still be possible, but if you have like a physical neurological issue and you're getting tremors, um, you might want to experiment with posture. So maybe some more a more restrained posture, like even a lying down posture, which is generally it's difficult because of the tendency for sleepiness. But it may be in the case of if you have severe muscle tremors, that you may be able to calm the body that way. Next one. Also, do you agree with the translation of mudita as appreciative joy over empathetic joy? I feel a lot of gratitude in this practice. Yeah, I think either one. I think either appreciative or empathetic. Either one would be okay. Yeah, I'm glad you like that practice. It's actually a very good practice for brightening and clarifying the mind. And it doesn't tend to get a lot of press. Everybody talks about metta and to some degree karuna, but mudita is a very good practice for kind of clearing the mental cobwebs, bringing up joy and brightness. What is the Sanskrit origin of ekagata? Is it ekagrata? Could it then mean gathered? Honestly, I don't know what the Sanskrit origin was. That is something maybe I'll try and look that up. That is a good question. I see it as a poly compound, and a lot of poly compounds are ambiguous. Famous one is tathagata, which could mean the thus come or the thus gone, and ekagata is ek long a g a t a, and the A being doubled could be like two separate A's merged together. So the way it usually turns into one pointedness is eka agata, meaning, and the agata is a word that can mean like a point of a house, a peak of a house, something like that. But I think it could also be, the compound could also be parsed as eka gata, having gone to oneness. Gata as a participle meaning gone, as in tathagata. I think in any case, whatever the grammar, I think that works better for your meditation. Thanks for the analogy of the Rock of Gibraltar. It's like that. Everything comes and goes from still point. Yes. Just had my tooth pulled about an hour ago. Oh, goodness. Thank goodness for these teachings and the story of Ajahn Chah getting all his remaining teeth pulled at once. I very much pictured him. Yeah, I've had several teeth out, but I've had 4 teeth out in my lifetime. Hope you don't have too much after suffering from it. When practicing samadhi through metta or karuna, I have a hindrance in the form of a savior complex for others. How can I let go of this hindrance? Yeah, try and give up the while you're doing the practice. Try and give up any sense of wanting to fix things. You're doing karuna, you're focusing on being suffering. You should have like a wish that their suffering be dissipated, but don't let that subtly turn into thinking of projects of how you're going to do that. Just have that as an aspiration, your wish you're throwing out into the universe without any practical aspect to it. You cannot, having a savior complex really extreme egotism. I mean, you cannot save the whole universe. Beings are going to suffer. If one is forced to put on a mask during meditation or forced to remain equanimous, how can one approach this action rooted in moha? Should one stop meditating altogether or try to do it? Yeah, okay. I'm not really sure what to say to that. My personal opinion, and I do get flack for it, but my personal opinion is that the masks are entirely useless. They're kind of a virtue signal. Then they obstruct your breathing. I think it's a hindrance to meditation to have cloth stuffed in your face. But on the other hand, if you're meditating with a group and they're requiring people to wear a mask just to keep peace and not make trouble, probably better to do it. And just try and think of it as a sacrifice you're making out of compassion to others. Is it normal that my nose feels dull and numb when doing anapanasati? There's all kinds of sensations that can occur in anapanasati. It could be just that your awareness has become very, very subtle. Just try and remain focused at the nose tip and try to observe ever more subtle movements of air. What is the difference between ahimsa and avihimsa? Ahimsa is non-harming. I don't know offhand what avihimsa is. It may be the Sanskrit for ahimsa. I'm not sure. I'll leave that one. Do you need to take the 8 precepts to develop firm samadhi? It certainly is a big help. And if you're on a meditation retreat, it's highly recommended that you keep the 8 precepts, because the idea of the 8 precepts is as an aid to sense restraint, by taking a vow to cut off various avenues by which the mind runs off into the sense realm. Eka equals 1, agrata equals top priority. Is this correct, Ajahn? I suppose you could, like, all these poly compounds could be broken up in different ways. I suppose that's another way of looking at it. I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. I like to think of it as eka equals 1 or oneness, and gata equals gone to, or having achieved, arrived at. Hingsa equals violence, killing, trouble, etc. Yes, so ahimsa is non-harming, essentially. Would the formal practice of reflecting on ownership of karma, if developed firmly, eradicate a savior complex? Yeah, that's actually not bad. You think, if you realize that beings in suffering are suffering due to their karma. Can samadhi arise from studying the suttas? It can help it can sort of bring the mind to a place of the language of the suttas, particularly in the Pali, is so kind of resonant and euphonic, kind of almost poetic. Well, it is poetic, and it can bring the mind into that very peaceful place. But again, it won't be a deep samadhi because it's not unified. But it would certainly be a good precursor to a meditation. Would be reading some suttas and then go into meditation. Yeah. Ahimsaka was Angulimala's real name. I could be wrong about that. I got to double check. Okay. What do you think of the idea that Vipassana is a later Burmese invention? Is there evidence for this technique in early work? Yes, it is. In the form we have it and we know it, and when you say this technique, you have to clarify that to say that there are several different Vipassana techniques, and only a few of them have really made an impact outside of Burma. But the idea of formally practicing some rigorous method, such as the Mahasi method or the Ubakin method adopted by Goenka and a few others, it seems like they only arose in Burma in the 18th century. That there was a movement, a kind of, they call it the Vipassana movement, where some sayadaws were developing particular meditation techniques. So you won't find explicit instructions like that in the suttas anywhere. Which is not to say that nobody was doing some form of Vipassana in those days. I tend to think of the Satipatthana Sutta, which is often considered to be the kind of root text for all the Vipassana movement. It's so concise and so open to interpretation that my suspicion is that text was not verbatim as the Buddha spoke it, but is a summary. It's like the Buddha, probably the Buddha gave a course on meditation over the course of several weeks. And what we have here are someone's notes, like the chapter headings. Is what many coin flow state when one gets immersed in one's activity, like, say, playing music or sports, samadhi? It can be, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it does have some qualities like samadhi. Again, it can never be deep enough to be jhana because there's an activity going on. That's not, even an activity could lead to samadhi if it's completely repetitive, a simple movement. So there are some meditations, not so much in the theravada tradition, but there are some meditations that are based on movement, like doing yoga. And when people get totally absorbed in something like, and the two examples the questioner gives are music and sports, and these are, this is definitely a phenomena that people report. Sports people talk about being in the zone, where you're sort of you're just doing it. It's a it is a kind of a samadhi because the mind is unified on that activity. And what happens when someone's like in the zone doing something, sports or music or any kind of skill-based activity, and they feel like they're doing it flawlessly, one of the features is they're not thinking about it. If they start thinking about it, then they lose that and they fall back into a lesser state. The Buddha says in some discourses we should develop samadhi so we can be free from regret. Is the word kukucha used in this context? Yes, I believe it is. I think it is kukucha. Simple qigong movements are excellent for finding flow state. Yes, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's the kind of very good example of a kind of meditation in action. Is tanha insight meditation not vipassana? I don't know what you mean by tanha insight meditation. Tanha is desire. So I'm not, that question's not clear to me. Is it true that firmly keeping the 8 precepts leads to a permanent first jhana dwelling? No, I don't think, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily true. Keeping the 8 precepts makes it easier to develop deep samadhi, and it's attaining to jhana that is the prerequisite for rebirth in the Brahma world, which is it's not a permanent, but it's certainly very long-term residence in that state of mind. Yeah, good. Someone says he lives in an area where there are no Dharma talks given, and he enjoys the ability to have a live stream type teaching. Yeah, good. There's a lot of other monks doing this kind of thing out there. I'm not the only one. So. I know Ajahn Sona at Birken does regular kind of Q&As. Any plans to make any more videos with Ajahn Sona? Eventually, I would hope so, but nothing in the works at the moment. Sorry, I meant panha. So I mean panya. Yeah, insight meditation. Yeah, panya is wisdom. Insight meditation develops wisdom, and it's usually that's what we mean by vipassana, which is literally clear seeing. How to make merit specifically for samadhi? Well, when you make merit, you can make an aspiration. May this, and that will help with the fruition of the karma. You can make merit. May this go to benefit my ancestors. May this go to a future rebirth in the Dewa realm, or you can make an aspiration. May this act of merit help me to develop deeper samadhi. Okay, so I think we're getting close to the hour, so we kind of wind it down. And next week will be the last in this series. We'll be dealing with upekkha, or equanimity, which is another big topic. And I hope you could all have a good week, and I'll see you again.